Hello and welcome to your weekly podcast from Freestyle Media in partnership with the Magic Five. And this week I'm delighted to be joined by swimming royalty Hannah Miley, or Smiley Miley, as my dad said when I told him that Hannah had agreed to come on the podcast. So thank you very much for coming on.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
No, honestly, it's a real pleasure, and it's been a really big few weeks for you. You obviously got awarded an MBE about a month ago, and you've just recently had your birthday as well. Great few weeks.
Yeah, it's been it's one way to kind of start your summer holidays, isn't it? Yeah, it's been incredible. I mean, that whole experience of receiving the MBE was it's crazy. I mean, to think that I've met the king, that's very, very cool and very strange at the same time. And yeah, I had my birthday last week, so it feels like time is absolutely flying past because again, scary to think that he was like a month ago. But it's nice to kind of just have those memories, kind of capitalize on them and make the most of them, really.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued to know what it's actually like receiving an MBE because in my head, you get like chauffeured down in a limo and lunches on and all the rest of it. I suspect the reality is quite different. Like, what was your actual experience like on the day?
Oh, very much so. I mean, we definitely had to rough it with four of us sharing a car. So it was my mum, my dad, and my husband that came down as my guests. Definitely. Well, I guess I was chauffeured in some sense because it was my dad that drove us down. But it was just surreal. Like you suddenly feel like you don't fit in either because everybody's in these amazing outfits with these fascinators and look so smart, and there's set rules of what you can and can't do on the sort of grounds, and you just suddenly become very aware of, I feel very out of place here. I'm so used to just being in tracksuits, comfies, and I've got to practice curtsying and try not fall over in my heels. So yeah, it was a really, really special day. And what was lovely was that the day before, it was peeing it down with rain. It was so wet and soggy, and I thought, oh, okay. And then on the day, it was beautiful sunshine. Like you couldn't have asked for a better day for it. And it was just lovely. Going through into the castle, your mouth, you're just constantly picking up the bottom of your jaw because you're just like, oh, this is so cool. And all the different rooms, and you kind of get put into a room and basically get told to wait. And the funniest part was when they tell you what the procedure is for going into meet. And we didn't know who was going to be handing out the awards. So it was literally only about 10-15 minutes beforehand that we found out that it was going to be King Charles. And they're running through the list of things, of the do's, the don'ts, what you should be doing. And you're taking it all in. And as soon as they finish, you panic and you think, I can't remember what he's just said. Yeah. And then in the queue waiting to kind of go up, everybody's practicing their curtsying, and it was just so surreal. And then next thing you know, you're standing in front of the king and having a conversation with him. And it was so surreal. And then afterwards it was just, as you can tell, my brain can't really process any more words on how to describe it, but it was just amazing. And it was really, really nice, especially to share it with the people who really, there were so many people that I wanted to be there, but we could only take 3. But they were, the ones who've been with me, for my whole career and everything that I've done and got me to the point where I'm at. And it was just nice to share that moment with them. So, a bit like with my swimming career, with my dad being my coach, every time I stood on the podium or stood on the block, I was always sharing that moment with him, whether he was in the arena or whether if he was at home watching. It's not just me up there. So for me, standing up, receiving the MBE wasn't just me up there. It was everybody who'd helped me and supported me. So it was, a very, very special moment.
Yeah, for sure. And that's always the reality of swimming, isn't it? It's never just what you've done. It's always, your parents shipping you around when you're a kid. Yeah. It's your partner, it's your siblings, the people who kind of have to, I guess, put up with it day by day. And then obviously all the coaches who probably don't get, they certainly don't get recognition outside of the sport, where swimmers would, because, swimmers would literally be on the TV or on the podium or whatever. So it's certainly interesting. Actually, something that you said there about getting to share it with your parents. You actually said, I made the joke earlier about being chauffeured, and you said, well, actually, you kind of got chauffeured by your parents. Actually, I thought straight away, that's just way nicer anyway. I think if I was offered, a limo with, I don't know, a driver and a bunch of celebrities, or my parents, I'd want to go with my parents every day.
Yeah. The conversation's much more fun, and just It is. It's about sharing those moments, and that's one of the things that, for me, sport has taught me an awful lot. Is, you've got those moments that you experience, but they last longer when you share them with others, because then it's conversations that you can have of, remember when we did this, and remember when we've done that. So, for me, sharing moments has always been, important for me, and appreciating as well, because, as you rightly said, when you stand up on the blocks, yes, you are the individual that's competing and racing, but the support team behind you is huge.
Yeah.
Whether an age group swimmer or an elite swimmer, you have a team around you, and it doesn't have to be the world's best individuals. It's, as you say, your family, your siblings that have to put up with your spending all weekend at a really hot and sweaty swimming pool, or your teammates, or your partner. So for me, I always appreciate and really like to kind of for them to recognize that, I certainly wouldn't be the person I am today had it not been for my parents, had it not been for my brothers, and for my husband as well. So, it's kind of a nice full circle for me, kind of everybody coming together, from starting off my dad teaching me to swim in a little pool, to now getting an award from the king. That's kind of a crazy journey.
Oh, and actually, I really like that. That's pretty much the first thing you talked about there, was just actually the fact that it is the journey that you've all been on. And I think, you'd be forgiven for sitting there saying, "Oh, I'm really proud of everything I've achieved." But actually, I get the impression that you're all about everything that, like, we've achieved. It's you were the one on the block and in the water, but I feel like you very much have that 360 view of, like, do you know what? It wasn't just me. It was all of us.
Yeah, massively. And also, I'm the type of person that, like, if my name got called out in assembly or had to stand up on my own, my face would go beetroot red. I don't handle spotlight on me very well unless I'm got goggles and cap on, and then I kind of almost hide in my own sort of like swimming zone, and I can kind of cope with that. But with that bright red face, and it's like, oh, I have to cope with the spotlight. So being able to share that takes that pressure off me just a little bit.
No, for sure. Well, and again, that's another great reason for for having your family around you, because that's what we all do for each other, isn't it? We're all there to take the pressure off each other. Right, before we get going sort of properly, I recently ran a competition with Nathan Oxford, so of Oxford Strength and Conditioning, for a swimmer to win a free strength and conditioning profile test and report at his new Barnsley-based gym. He's then also offering a 50% off follow-up PT session. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do, Hannah, is we've got a short list of 4 names. I'm not going to tell you who those names are at the moment, but 2 of them have heads and 2 of them have tails. And I've got a coin here. You can see it literally on the screen: heads and tails. I'm gonna flip this coin right now, and we've got tails, so that puts 2 people in the round. And now what I'm going to do is the 2 people that are tails, I'm going to make one of them heads and one of them tails. And I'm going to flick it one more time for the final round. And it's heads, which makes Joe Beardsworth the winner. There we go. So you didn't actually have to do anything there. You were just purely there for confirmation, but that's fine. So Joe Beardsworth, congratulations. You are off to Barnsley, of all places, to go and have a brilliant session with Nathan, who is fantastic. And by the way, Nathan's got a couple of athletes out of the World's Masters champs at the moment who are just winning medals all over the place. So I'm sure it'll be a fantastic session. So anyway, thank you, Hannah, just for watching that. You didn't really need to get involved too much there, but that's
Right. Cheating.
No, exactly. Well, that's what it was all about. So look, 3 Olympic Games, 2008, 2012, 2016, which is fantastic. 2 Commonwealth Games gold medals, world and European champion, European record holder as well. It's a stellar career. 18 months since retiring, and you have done absolutely lots since. But the first question really is, have you really missed the feeling of competing?
Yeah, initially, I think when I announced my retirement, I knew I was finished with racing. That was kind of like my first feeling. I was ready to move on. I was ready for swimming to not be a priority anymore and move it down the list so other things could take priority. And I kind of thought I'd miss the training more so. Sorry, miss the training more so than the competing. But as the sort of 18 months have gone by, especially watching like the World Championships, even the British National Champs, and there's been a couple of times where I've done some commentary work for just some of the local meets in sort of the northeast of Scotland. I realise I actually do miss the competing, and it's not so much the making the podiums and winning, or kind of trying to break records. It was the hype, the build up to a competition, the nervous energy that you get the night before, the routine of packing your swimming bag, double checking you've got everything that you need, that kind of like logical process that you go through, and then turning up on poolside. When I did the commentary work for the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham last year, it was the first time I'd been to, I guess, a Commonwealth Games where I wasn't competing. And the funniest feeling was just walking out onto basically the stands, and the sheer panic I suddenly felt, because I thought, I've not brought my racing suit. And then I just went through this whole panic mode, like, oh my God, I'm not ready. Oh, hang on, I'm not racing. Right, okay. And it was such an instant reaction, because I'm so used to, 17 years worth of racing and internationally. And it was like, oh, right, okay. False alarm, it's fine. So yeah, I have missed it, but it's quite a nice feeling, in a sense of, yeah, you pine a little bit of what you would do personally, but I actually love watching it now. I love getting excited, and for me, watching the World Championships in Japan was kind of the highlight, because it was just so exciting. You've got a new generation of athletes coming through, so you could kind of almost see like a changing of the guard, and where people are now taking the sport to is just incredible. The amount of world records that were broken. I mean, I was there in 2009, where I think there was like 43 world records broken because of polysuits. So to see that many, especially a year out from the Olympic Games, is going to make Paris next year so special. So to basically answer your question in a very long, convoluted way, yes, I do miss competing, but it's more the feelings when you're there. Like sometimes the actual race itself, and then touching the wall, and then the anticipation of, okay, what's the scoreboard going to tell me? How am I going to feel? Those parts maybe I don't miss as much. And yeah, even that moment when I was watching the 400 IM at the the Commonwealth Games, kind of going, maybe could I hung on for one more year and raced it? And then I watched the final and saw someone McIntosh absolutely smash it, and I was like, yeah, no, it's probably a good idea I wasn't.
No, she's a very, very special swimmer, I have to say. But no, that's really interesting, because obviously I've never competed on the elite stage, but even I get a wonderful sense of excitement when I watch watch the pros on the telly or whatever. And watching the world champs a few weeks ago, I was just loving every moment, and waking up in the morning, because obviously the time difference, the heats are taking place overnight. And you sort of wake up and think in a few hours' time the finals, but I'm sort of there checking through all the heat results, and oh my God, look, they've just dropped that time. Are you kidding me? And it's such a great feeling, isn't it? So even though you might not be competing, the fact that you still get to feel involved in the moment, I guess, is a really important thing.
Yeah, it is. And even with the having, once I retired, I did struggle to get back in the pool and actually get a routine of sorts. So for me, you've done it for so long, to then suddenly not have it in your life, for me, felt really odd. And it was trying to work out, well, how do I get swimming to be involved in my life in some shape or form? So talking about it, watching it, getting excited about it, for me has actually been quite a nice way to still keep it there without it being so encompassing. As an athlete, you literally live, eat, breathe, sleep swimming all the time. So it's nice to kind of have a little bit more of a dialed back version.
It's interesting, because you hear a lot of people, sports people who retire, regardless of what the sport is, and they say, one of the big things that I guess they struggle with is not having their diary full, and just like struggling because they've been so used to a very regimented routine, and it's really difficult to adapt afterwards. And obviously, a lot of the things that you've gone on to do has meant that you've probably not had such an experience where you've kind of just literally been sitting around twiddling your thumbs. And I guess as well, it would be very different if you were, say, a footballer who was a millionaire, because you wouldn't have to do all of these new things if you didn't want to, and that's probably part of the problem, to be honest. But I think so I think that the routine is something that you can always establish new routines, and I think that's really important. But I love what you said there about how you still love being involved in the sport, and obviously talking about it, watching it, because I'd imagine there are a lot of swimmers who finish racing and go, I just want nothing to do with the sport now for 5 years, 10 years, maybe ever again. But I get the impression you still just love it.
Yeah, I do. Like, I've gone through a lot of, and I say trauma in like inverted commas, because for me, some of the moments I experienced were quite traumatic. It's probably more emotional trauma, like physically wise, I'm fine. But emotionally, there were quite some traumatic moments. And, you give your heart and your soul when you swim. It's one of those sports where it is so unforgiving because you train so much and so often in an environment that's not normal or natural. So you have to train as frequently as you do. Everybody questions and queries, why do you have to train as you do when you watch those in athletics? Training's definitely a lot less, higher intensity and more land-based. But when they walk away from their training, they're still activating muscle groups in similar movement patterns to what they would in training. Whereas in swimming, the one bit that you can, probably being in a bath is probably the closest you could replicate swimming.
Yes.
I think, look at lockdown. The swimmers were probably the really most impacted because of that. But it was so inspiring to see how inventive some of them became because of it. And I, having gone through, I guess, some of the emotional highs and lows of it, I've kind of had to come to terms with so many different reformations of my own identity within sport. Because as a youngster, it's all about winning. It's all about trying to beat the person next to you. And then it's all about trying to drop PBs, and you get really excited and your parents get really excited. So you kind of get conditioned that that's what's expected. And then when you join national teams, you've got criteria to meet in order to stay on funding or in order to stay on teams or stay in programs. So, everything's kind of black and white and number based. But, as a human, we are not robots. We're not always going to be black and white. You're going to have things that just occur because it's life. And, just kind of being able to reflect on that and redefine what does success mean to you, I think has been kind of a key element for me. My biggest turning point was in 2016. I was desperate for that Olympic medal and felt that my validation had to come from this medal, and just missing it by 1500ths of a second completely destroyed my confidence and my self-worth. And I had to really rebuild myself back up because I stopped enjoying it. I was really hard on myself. I was in such a rubbish place in my head that with 2018 onwards, up until I retired, even though I never won another international medal pretty much sort of the 2019 season until I retired, it was probably the most enjoyment I actually ever had out of my swimming career. And for me, that's what stayed with me. And because I was then allowed to basically retire on my own terms, I mean, I could have very easily retired after 2016. I could have very easily retired just before lockdown. But no, I decided to do it on 1st of December in 2021, because December back in 2004 was when I made my first Commonwealth Youth Games team. And it just felt like a nice kind of full circle, and it felt complete. And every athlete's got some form of OCD or some kind of weird quirk that we've got because, we are unique individuals. We have to have a little bit of crazy in your head to kind of, do what we do in sport. And for me, I like complete. I couldn't finish a training set on like 6,900 meters. It had to be 7K,
Of course.
if even if it was 7,050, I had to make it 7,100. Like little things like that where it doesn't matter, but it really matters to you. So for me, having that full circle was really nice. And then actually the month before, in my hometown in Inverurie, the old pool that I used to train in got demolished, and a new pool's been created, which is fantastic. It's see that they've got a brand new facility, and they had a 400 IM at that meet, and I was like, it'd be really nice. My last ever 400 IM goes back to pretty much where I did all my training, in a brand new pool. It's almost like a handover of being like a closing of a chapter. So it really helped me kind of move on from it. And then I think because I was able to finish maybe the way that I felt was satisfying for me, it seemed crazy for me to not have an element of swimming still part of my life, because it shaped so much of who I am as a person, how I think, how I sort of am, both the good and the bad. And for me to completely abandon that, I wasn't ready to to just not have it in my life. So for me, it's just readapting and shaping it in a way that fits in the way that I'm my life currently is. And at the minute it's a little bit chaotic, and I'm not always in the pool. I have struggled a little bit with doing that, but when I am in the pool, I enjoy it. And then there's times where I don't even have to get in the pool, but I'm at a pool helping younger swimmers, or I'm doing talks to younger swimmers. So there's some influence I can have still in swimming, because I feel with my career, I just want to be able to help and give back, because I've had so much in return. I feel like I owe it back to the sport to, keep it going.
Mm.
So yeah.
It's a wonderful mentality, and actually that kind of last couple of years that you had there, where you talked about, I guess, the pressure being off. You kind of readapted your whole mindset. That's actually a really, really nice way to kind of end the sport. And I wonder if actually, a lot of swimmers or athletes generally get to that point in their career where it almost feels like just a bit of a bonus time, because you're of an age where if you were to retire, nobody would say, "My God, you're young." You'd already done 3 Olympic Games by this point. So actually, you just thought, you know what, you can carry on for as long as you like now. And as I say, you picked a really nice moment to end in terms of the full circle thing. You talked about some of the struggles that you have had. You've posted on Instagram around the fact that you've being part of Women's Sport Trust, the Unlocked program. Talk to us a little bit about that and how that's helped.
That's been a huge help, and actually probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me since retiring. Once I retired, you have that 2-week sort of honeymoon phase of being like, I don't have to set my alarm at 4:30. I can get up whenever I want. I can do whatever I want, and it's great. You've got freedom. You've got so much time, and then the reality of not really having a routine hits. And for me, what was the biggest shock was actually how much my self-confidence plummeted. I was so unconfident in a lot of things because I felt like I was just a newbie at everything, because I'd been in such an intense bubble and shielded pretty much from, the majority of big things in life. And all of a sudden I was now out in the big world and I hadn't a clue what to do. And I just felt so lost, so alone, and so afraid because of my age. I felt, people my age should know this. People my age are getting married, they're having families, they're doing this, that, and the other. And I'm just sat here not knowing what I'm going to do with myself. And one of the best things I could have done was actually speaking to folk. And I spoke to Lizzie Simmons. And basically we just had such a good, honest chat. And I was just hearing out what she went through. And it was really funny because everything that she described and how she felt and what she was experiencing going through that initial transition was everything I was feeling right there and then. And it felt so refreshing to feel validated and being like, okay, I'm not on my own with this. I can do something about it. And she was the one who recommended reaching out to Claire Bennett and, have a look at the Women's Sports Trust. And I did. And they have like a program where, they take people on and you have to apply and basically do like a little video interview of saying who you are, what, things you're passionate about within women's sport and what you'd like to see, what can you do to help make changes. And for me, I'm a huge advocate for female health for personal reasons, and also just because I feel it's an area that is now starting to get talked about a lot, which is good, but there's still so much that I think could be done to help. And it's not just the athletes, but parents and coaches and just getting everybody on the same page with it. So I kind of, again, my confidence held me back with putting the video in straight away. And I think it was literally on the day of the deadline. I thought, oh, just do it. So I just did a quick video, said what I needed to say, sent it, and then I thought, I'm not going to hear back. It's fine. And then I found I heard back, and I was part of the Unlocked 2022 cohort, and it was incredible. And it was just the fact that when we had the hangouts, so you meet up with all the people that are on that sort of particular Unlocked group, everyone's got their own mission and their own kind of value of what they think is really important for them to try and help progress women's sport. And hearing the struggles that a lot of these athletes were going through, had gone through, or were willing to listen, and each athlete, we would kind of get a story from them. We got chances to speak to lots of different guest speakers, and it just was so therapeutic, because we'd even start, something as simple as every 2 weeks we would have, a hangout where we would just check in on each other. And that for me was massive, because it was, if I didn't have that, I don't really know where my headspace would be, because there's just that simple check-in of, how are you doing today? Or, are you having a good week, bad week? How's it been? And you could be open and honest, because to start with, you feel a little bit enclosed of being like, can I trust my feelings with these people who I've never really met? I've only met virtually. And then over time, we've just kind of learnt to bond together, because you realise you've got the shared passion of supporting women's sport. And yeah, it was really, really helpful and very, very interesting to be part of, and has opened up a lot of opportunities for me. And I've met some incredible people, and it's allowed me to build confidence again, and just kind of reignite and keep the passion that I have for supporting women's sport and just using it to my advantage. So yeah, that I kind of owe a lot to the Women's Sports Trust for helping me with the transition after announcing my retirement.
Yeah, it's really, really great to hear that you are obviously in a better place now, which is fantastic. And what's really powerful about what they do is it sounds very simple, but when you ring your friend, your parents, your whatever, and they say, "Oh, you're right," that's generally a throwaway question, isn't it? Oh, because it's just the polite kind of thing to do. You're unlikely to say, "Oh, to be honest, I'm not doing so great," because if they've rang you, they're ringing you to probably talk about something else. They're not ringing you to talk about how you feel necessarily. Whereas these conversations are literally designed to talk about how you feel. So when
Yeah,
you're then asked the question, "How are you?" or "Are you having a good week?" the whole point is that you're open and honest. And so even though it's a very, very simple thing, the structure that's in place means that you actually end up having a very different conversation to one that you would have if your
yeah,
dad rings you up. Because as I say, he's ringing you about something. He's probably to see what you're having for tea tonight or something. So it's as I say, it's a very simple thing, but I think it's fantastic. Um, do you think that swimming or the sport of swimming, whether that's British swimming or maybe a separate association, for example, should do more for athletes to help them with the transition when they retire?
yeah. I do think so. I was fortunate enough that I was part of the Scottish system. So when I retired, I had like a 6 month transition phase where I was offered online webinars for lots of different parts. And I think it's that sense of belonging. And that's where the Women's Sports Trust was so helpful, because you had athletes who were current, but also you had athletes who had retired,
Yeah.
because you almost feel like you don't belong, but you're kind of stuck in limbo. Your mindset and body is still very much elite athlete, but you're living in the normal world. So it's like you can't get the support that you maybe would an elite athlete because you're no longer competing, but you don't fit in with normal day-to-day work. So it's kind of knowing where you fit in with that. And that was where it was really nice, because you got to meet other retired athletes and realize you still fit in even with the athletes who are competing. But when I was going through that transition as well with, excuse me, Scottish sport, um, I did have psychological support for 6 months, and that as well helped. And I don't know what the packages are with regards to British swimming. There is sort of, I guess, a culture within elite sport that once you retire, you are pretty much left in a sense of, okay, that's your choice. Bye.
Yeah.
you know, like big announcement, you get lots of messages and comments and praise, and then that's it. There's no kind of like follow up. And each athlete's scenario of retirement is very, very different, because you have those who retire who are fortunate enough, like myself, who were able to retire under their own choice. They could make that call. You get some athletes who are forced into retirement, whether
Mm.
it's injury, circumstances, illness. And they're the ones that I think really, really suffer and struggle. And I don't know what the pathways and strategies are for governing bodies with regards to that. So definitely think there could be a strategy, even like a group. And as I say, a mixture of both elite and retired, I think is really helpful, because you still get to stay in touch with the current, but also you get to see how those who have retired are coping and managing. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds, so that you can slowly wean yourself away from being that current athlete into being, well, what's your life going to look like with competitive sport?
Mm.
There's no set answer for it, because as I say, everyone's path is always going to be different. Some people jump straight into a job, and for
Yeah.
them that works because they're straight into a routine. Other people like myself who has no idea what they want to do, and I still don't know what I want to do. And you can feel a little bit lost for a long time, or people go searching for that similar adrenaline hit that you would get from training, from racing and competing. So yeah, there definitely needs to be management of sorts. But I do think that 6 months sort of transition phase that I had from Scottish sport was really, really helpful, because it did
Mm.
kind of pull back and ease back. And some of the conversations I had with like the performance lifestyle advisor and the sports psychologist were really good, because it was a panic of being like, have I made the right call? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? I don't know. And they came back with such a simple answer of being like, well, if it's not right, just go back competing again. It was like, Yeah, it's kind of straightforward. I mean, obviously, maybe a bit more complicated than that, but you do as an athlete live in your own head, and sometimes you can create your own problems because you're so used to living a set way. So when you've got other people giving advice, it is helpful, because sometimes you need to figure it out for yourself. We're so used to being told what to do and following orders that suddenly having the free reign of being able to do what you want to do can be a little bit daunting and terrifying. So having somebody there to give you the confidence in making choices and decisions, and knowing that, okay, if you've made a mistake, it's fine, you can move on from it. Or there's always that fear of failure as an athlete. So it is trying to build that confidence that, it's not failure, it's just a learning experience, in a sense of, okay, that didn't go right, it's not the end of the world, let's move on from it or learn from it, and then kind of, fix the issue if needs be. So, yeah.
No, I agree. Again, it's hard to know really what the answer is. I mean, just to my mind, there are, for example, you've got career coaches out there that, that are prepared to work with anyone, people like me, and I'm not a professional athlete, and they're fantastic because you break down all of the things that come naturally to you in terms of like your passions and your energy, and then it can really help you map out actually what you want to do. Also, I know that, like, just for example, a lot of universities kind of have partnerships with companies that run apprenticeships. So again, could that be an avenue for, say, British Swimming or whatever, to kind of work with certain companies to offer some kind of route out of swimming? Again, I don't really know what the answer is, having not been in there myself, but it's food for thought, and it's great to know that you at least had something, which is more than probably some people. But no, you have, I mean, obviously you talked about some of the difficulties that you've had, but on a really positive note, you've done some fantastic stuff since you have finished competing. I mean, frankly, you wouldn't have an MBE if you hadn't have done that, which is fantastic. So again, I've noted that you've worked with Typically 28, so that's periods, performance, and planning. Again, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's kind of a little business that I've set up, basically surrounding my sort of aim for just improvement in female health and advocacy on menstrual.
This is the company that you set up yourself?
Yes, yeah, Typically 28. So it was, the name of it is something that I've only come up with recently, but the kind of premise of the business, the company, or the work that I want to do was pretty much set up during lockdown. So I'm going to be kind of like frank and maybe a bit blunt with how it came to that point. So when I was 14, 15, really struggled with my periods, and there wasn't as much information around that time because that was 15 years ago. And the information at the time was, okay, well, if it's being problematic, go on the pill, then you can stop your periods, it'll be fine. So I was put on the pill from the age of 15, and I was 30 and I was still on the pill. And basically that was just how I managed my career. And, I had a really good career with it. And we were working on sort of a female support group called Project Elsa for Scotland, and we were looking at lots of different sort of people trying to support, how do we get girls to sort of remain within sport, within swimming, and what are the areas that kind of cause them to drop out. There's lots of different things. You've got social pressures, you've got career commitments, people might choose more of a career than sport. And then the other one was menstruation as well, was another incident, because depending on what experiences you've had. And from that group, someone got in touch and said, it'd be really good if you could speak with Georgie Brunevals. And I was kind of like, ooh, who's this person? So I was like Googling everything about her, and it was really, really fascinating. And I got very, very fortunate enough to get an interview with her, just to basically chat through and explain my situation. I was kind of in this limbo of trying to aim for a fourth Olympics, but we're in lockdown. I'm not on funding anymore. I'm kind of like, where does my career go? I don't know. And then she just started asking me all these personal questions, and I told her about being on the pill, and she was like, so, did you have a break after every 5 years? And I was like, was I supposed to? And she's like, yeah, you're supposed to take a break and let your body naturally, have a period of months. And I was like, okay, well, I probably was told this at the age of 15, but, it's 15-year-olds aren't going to remember what, you're supposed to be doing in 5 years' time. So, the fact that sport doctor didn't really kind of pick up on that, even my GP didn't pick up on that. And I was like, okay. So I kind of made a decision to come off it and basically work out what my body cycle was like now, and actually naturally, what are my natural hormones? Where does it lie? And learn to listen to my body. And that whole year was incredibly fascinating. Because my mindset was obviously set on competing on your period was just a pain in the butt. So that was really difficult to kind of overcome. But learning to listen to my body, I became the most robust I'd ever been in the gym, strength-wise, endurance-wise. And I just realized, you know what, this information is just so fascinating. Why didn't I know about it at the age of 30? I thought, surely I should know about this. So I started running online webinars and Zoom calls with clubs, individuals, basically supporting coaches and athletes, kind of saying, this information's out there. Are you aware of it? And, I'm not saying I'm an expert at it, but I'm just saying, here's a food for thought, get you, thinking about it. And I just kind of found it grew arms and legs, really, and just became really important for me, realizing there's a lot of misinformation out there, even looking at social media, how it's portrayed, and adverts as well. It's always negative talking about periods. It's not about trying to shove it in people's faces and always talk about it, but definitely to help, if we're trying to keep more girls and women in sport healthy, it's important to kind of understand how to read your body. And then for me, the tipping point was this article from Bobby Clay, an incredible young athlete who ended up pushing her body to the point where she never even started having a period, developed osteoporosis, and that really impacted. And I thought, I don't want athletes to ever feel that performance surpasses health. Health is so important, especially for the future of your mindset, your future body. Because as an athlete at the time, you don't think about that. I wasn't thinking about kids or families when I was 15. It was about, I want to perform. So it's trying to get that balance and help coaches, clubs, individuals understand this balance and understand, how do you read your body? And that's kind of where it came from. And just the more people I've spoken to, it's not just been in swimming, there's been in football, gymnastics, cycling, netball, lots of different sports. So it's been a really fascinating journey with that. And yeah, I kind of came up with the idea of typically 28 because average cycle is typically 28 days. So so I kind of run these workshops both in person and online for clubs, businesses, and little bits, because it's not just about periods. It's about managing your, emotional peaks and troughs, because again, you can have 1 week, you can train really, really hard. Next week, same training set, but you're not swimming the same. It's like, well, what's happening? So nutritional balance, mindset, learning ways and strategies that work for you. So it's being able to work with the individuals on a bespoke basis as well. So it's, it's been really, really fascinating. And it's not something that's new either, because you've got the Well HQ, you've got Fitter Women Morocco, like Dr. Natalie Brown, like there's so many people out there advocating it. So for me, if I can help try and get the voice out there using, I guess, my background as an athlete and, supporting what everybody's doing so that we're all on the same page, singing from the same hymn sheet, it's a win-win for me. And being able to talk about, my experiences and helping hopefully athletes overcome what, sorry, someone's at the door. I think my dog's kind of kind of just basically having tools so that they are better prepared, so that they can look after their bodies, so that we can hopefully have athletes who have a long, healthy career, and take their sport to whatever level they want to take it to.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, well done for setting that up. It's fantastic. And, again, that's really part of like taking the initiative and actually, being a self-starter. And you don't get that if you're suffering a massive crisis of confidence and, all the things that you've maybe talked about before. Yeah. So again, it just shows kind of how far you've come. And interestingly, we actually ran a 2-part episode on this podcast about 3 months ago, Women in Sport.
Yeah.
And we actually had a whole episode around periods, and I stepped aside from hosting that, and I let Beth, who's a brilliant swimmer, host it, and we had a couple of, they were all swimmers, a couple of people were doctors, talking about their experiences and things like that. I wonder if maybe there's something that we could do together here, to be honest, to help Typically 28, and just so that everybody knows, Typically 28 has social media presence. So if you're listening to this and you want to give it a follow, do give it a follow. I'm sure there's definitely something that we could do for sure. And then just moving forward onto other things, I know you do sort of run swim camps as well, which is fantastic. Yeah. gives you the opportunity to, I guess, to get in the pool and be on deck. And obviously there's the commentary point of view. So they're two things that you're doing at the moment that really get you in the thick of the sport still.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, as you might have gathered, I can talk the hind legs off a donkey. Necessarily always be clear and concise, but I love being able to kind of talk about swimming. So having the opportunity to commentate at the Commonwealth Games was both terrifying, but also really insightful. And actually, I've got a whole new level of respect for the pundits that basically do the live commentary, whether it's radio, TV. It's a lot of work, but it's incredible as well. And the amount of multitasking, flipping it. It was very intense. I was very fortunate that I had the legend that was Bob Ballard as my mentor for it, and Liz Johnson as well. So both of them kept me, on the straight and narrow. And again, it was a really good learning curve for me to kind of relax into something, in a sense of don't try and perfect it, don't try and over egg it, and try and be really perfect, because it's like you're gonna make.
I agree.
Make a mistake, move on. You can't go back and undo it. It's like you just got to roll with it. So that was a really interesting kind of life experience for me to learn from. And then even just doing like the little local meets, being able to give these kids, and again, hats off to commentators who have to pronounce names that are really difficult. Oh my goodness, the amount of names I've butchered over I do apologize if I've ever commentated and not said your name right, because I used to get so annoyed when people couldn't say my home club Geary, and they'd be like, and Hannah Miley, Garrioch, and I'm like, no, Geary, why don't you know this? And now I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. I've got a lot of respect now. It is hard. So, but it's fun as well. And I was very fortunate enough that I got to meet my ultimate idol in swimming, Misty Hyman, funnily enough, for my 30th birthday, thanks to my husband. That was a very cool surprise. Nice. And she kind of gave me a lot of good advice. So she always said, swimming will always be your best degree, because she says it's the one thing that you spent the most amount of time doing and understanding, in a sense of, you study and research it, not from like papers, but your body in the water, movement, pacing. You know when you're on pace, not by looking at the clock, but how you feel. You know when you're off pace. You know when you're sitting high in the water. So for me, knowing that swimming was my best degree allowed me to still dip in, no pun intended, with the coaching side and offer my expertise in a sense of what I've experienced, and hopefully in a way of, because I wasn't a big athlete, for me, I had to work hard technically because I didn't have the advantage of height and muscle strength.
Sure.
I had to find my advantage in other ways. And also as well, I thought it was important for me to kind of work on my social skills and communication skills too. I'm very elaborate in how I explain things, whereas coaching, you don't have time to do that. You have to be quite clear and concise and precise with it. And it then allowed me, if I can still swim and do the demos, I felt, practice what you preach. So if I couldn't explain it, I could then demo it. But I'm now in a position with my little wee neep in my stomach is starting to grow.
Of course.
So I'm having to learn to articulate it much more concisely and precisely. So being able to stay involved in swimming in that sort of sense, I love it, because you always meet some incredible little characters of some young kids that just want help with something, and it can just be one little thing that you say can make a really big difference to them. And I remember being in that position and the impact that had. So for me, that allows me to still stay in touch and involved in the sport, allows me to still stay in touch and involved in the technical aspects, looking at, because I love body movement, and different shapes and sizes of bodies move differently. We're not all the same, so you can't have the same technique across the board. So how do you adapt and shape it for that individual? Because when you look at some of the elite guys, it looks effortless, but if you're really being nitpicky, they're not all 100% perfect.
No, of course.
Katie Ledecky, when she does her breathing stroke, her hand sweeps out to the side. Yet sometimes we tell kids don't do that, but she naturally does that, because for her, she obviously must get better catch and has a better feel, and she does it that way. So it's important to have obviously the correct shape of the stroke, but allow them to have their own unique individuality or thumbprint for the technique, because everyone's got different limb lengths, body lengths, and also as well, if you work with other coaches, you learn as you go. So for me, I love being able to learn as I go. That kind of helps massively.
No, I agree. It's interesting you talked about all the different shapes and sizes and the uniqueness of our stroke, because my right hand, when I enter on freestyle, is always like this. It's always kind of like my wrist is down, and I'm really working hard on trying to straighten that out. But then, funnily enough, you watch Tom Dean, and he has like the same right hand as me, where he goes in at a really like weird angle. And so I sort of look at him and go, oh, at least I'm not the only one. And it's just a shame I'm nowhere near as fast as him. But yeah, I always thought I was just the unique one with this kind of strange hand position. But there we go. And just funnily enough, you said you've been in that position as well as being a young child, being at a swim camp. I remember actually having Ross Davenport come down to our club one time. And honestly, just him being there, forget anything that he told me or taught me, just him being there inspired me.
Yeah.
So you being on deck with all the kids and stuff, like I'm sure you're having a massive impact before you even open your mouth, which is fantastic. And that's why it's a lovely thing to talk about giving back to the sport. And that's why, it's so great for the kids to sort of have you there. But let's talk about your swimming career now, just before we finish. So I mean, we don't have too much longer until we both need to shoot off, unfortunately. But let's talk about I guess some reasonably fire questions then. So I guess the first question: did you always want to be a swimmer? So when you were a kid, and I'm sure you were always performing really well, were you sort of like when you were, I don't know, 12, 13, like I want to be a swimmer?
Yeah, it was kind of around about that age, maybe like 14, 15. I was like, I want to be a swimmer. Up until that point, it's not so much I want to be a swimmer. This is an environment that I felt like I belonged. I was kind of a bit of a quirky, awkward kid when I was younger. If everybody goes right, I was very stubborn and be like, I am going to go left. Whether it's the right way or not, I don't want to go. I didn't want to be seen as being like the sheep following everybody. So, call it stubbornness, awkwardness, whatever it is. And because not many, of my friends were swimming, I mean, we had like a good swim team, but it wasn't, a normal thing to do. It was, hockey or football or rugby or running or, kind of stuff where you can keep your hair dry, you can look pretty, kind of typical things like that. Where swimming, especially at school, you saw the girls that didn't want to swim basically use your period as an excuse, or I forgot my swimsuit sort of thing. Whereas I loved it because it was the one thing I felt like I could beat the boys at. And I was super competitive. Like I needed that outlet of sport in some sense. And I did try other sports, but I'm quite hypermobile. My elbows are double jointed. They bend the wrong way. Great for flying. Not doing other stuff. Got incredibly flat and floppy feet. Great for kick. Terrible for flying. So, I'm kind of like a walking penguin pretty much. But I genuinely just loved, and I lived in my own head as well a lot as a kid. I was very imaginative, and being in the water, because you've got that silence around you, I could just be as imaginative as I'd liked. And as soon as I was in that water, I was a mermaid, I was flying, I was a seal, I was a penguin. I could be whatever I wanted to be when I was in the water, and I had to work hard at it. I wasn't naturally good at it. But one thing that my dad was really good at was he got me to play in the water a lot. And we always played a game called Sharks. And we always did lots of different things. So there was a balance between, focus in training. But he also let me have fun. And that was really important because I learned a lot actually through play as well. Things like floating, sculling, being able to be quite buoyant in the water, moving my body with minimal hand movement. And, it was just something that I kind of enjoyed doing. And I love racing. I said that competitive edge was right there from the start. I've also got 2 younger brothers. So sibling competitiveness just comes in hand, really. So it was about 14, 15, because I had other activities. And I just realized when it became to the decision of which one do you want to keep doing, all the other activities and sports I dropped because I wanted to go with swimming more often because it was where I felt I belonged and enjoyed the most. So yeah,
I'm pleased to hear that, and I'm pleased to hear that you love it, because I'm often intrigued by athletes into of any sport. How much do they really love it, or is it a case of they just happen to be very good at it? And that doesn't necessarily mean they dislike it, but they might genuinely not be that passionate. I mean, I'm a big football fan. I remember hearing a story once about an ex-Tottenham player who a French player played in defence. Really good player. I remember him very well. He is retired now, but one of his former teammates said that he hated football. He was just really good at it, and you would ask him 3 days before the match, who are we playing this weekend, and he genuinely didn't know who he was playing against because he just had he just did not care. And I just think it's such a shame, when you've got such a talent to not enjoy it. But it sounds like you loved it, which is great. And
Yeah.
something else I wanted to ask as well, obviously, I
Yes.
always get the impression with any stroke, the stroke chooses you as opposed to you choosing the stroke. I mean, Adam PC, I think, is a great example of that. Mel
Yeah.
Marshall's often mentioned the fact that when she first ever watched him swim, she didn't think too much of him. Then he started doing breaststroke and she thought, oh my God.
Yeah.
But I always get the impression that's probably more of you choosing it, because clearly you've got to be good at all four strokes. You could have probably gone down, the fly, the freestyle route, the backstroke route, but you've chosen IM.
Yeah, basically it was an event that I knew everyone else hated, so it was an opportunity. I knew that as much as I'd love to have been a sprinter, the chances of me making a final and getting a second swim on sprint events were very, very slim. And I started off as a fly swimmer, so for me it was like I loved being a tough swimmer, in a sense of I loved doing the stuff that people didn't want to do, because again, if nobody wanted to do it, I would do it. We were given a choice once in a set. It was on one of these youth development camps for British swimming. It was a choice between a lactate or lactate production sprint set or 10 800s. And of course, everybody went for the sprint set. So I was like, I'm going to go for the 10 800s. And I did it. And then the last two were IM. And yeah, I felt really proud of myself because I knew no one else was going to do it. So I naturally was awful at breaststroke, so I definitely wasn't like jack of all trades, master, and well, yeah, kind of is a jack of all trades and master in none sort of thing. But we had kind of a saying, or like a strategy to go by when I was younger. It was, if you qualify for the event at a competition, you swam it. Mm-hmm. So as I was getting older, I started qualifying for more and more different events, and depending on what competition it is, sometimes I had loads, sometimes I didn't have loads. But it got to the point where I had qualified pretty much for every event, from like 50 free to 800 free, 50, all the way. So I had a 2-day competition where I literally had entered every race. And, I think my dad at one point got really worried because I think he saw me crying in the showers, and he's like, are you okay? He's like, we can withdraw. And I was like, no, I don't know why I'm crying. I'm just tired, but I don't want to stop. And I just got this satisfaction of being up for a race, knowing I could be just as competitive. And these guys, this is their first race, and I'd already done 2 other races. And it kind of gave me a bit of a buzz of people thinking, me like, who's that kid, who's just done like 3 races? And we're still kind of keeping up with everybody. So I learned an awful lot, and I figured out as well, like, I would swim into races. So sometimes the first 2 races, okay, didn't go according to plan, but I would get better.
Yes.
And the more I raced, the more I realized that was, like stand-up swims in training. So it kind of naturally shaped the 400 IM for me, with that ability of doing different events back to back, and kind of being quite versatile in that sense. But it took me until I was about 19 for my breaststroke to actually click into place. I mean, there's an interview, I think, from the 2006 Commonwealth Games where I stated I had to go out as hard as I could on flying back because my breaststroke was so pants, everyone caught me up. So it was kind of funny that it then flipped to the other way. But yeah, it was definitely because it was an event that I was more likely to make a final for a 400 IM than I would for a 50 free. So for me, cost-wise, if you're going to like, competitions, that I'd get my money's worth by entering an event that I was probably more likely to make a final for. So yeah.
I also wonder whether you talked about the play that you did as a kid with your dad coaching you. I wonder how much that had an influence on you actually being more of an all-rounder, having that ability to really feel the water, move in lots of different ways, actually made you as an all-rounder, which is interesting. I mean, we'll never know if that's the reality or not, but I suspect it probably is. Just a couple more questions. And I apologise, it's a shame we're not going to really talk about some of the amazing medals that you won, but I mean everybody knows about them, which is the main thing. What's your proudest moment in racing?
Probably 2 moments. The first one would be my 4th place in Rio, because at the time it wouldn't have felt like it, because as I say, it was all about trying to get on that podium. It was my 3rd shot, and it's the closest I'd ever gotten to an Olympic medal. 1500ths of a second is so agonizingly close. And I went through a really rough patch afterwards, but looking back at it, like fourth, I realized, fourth in the world's not bad.
Amazing.
And also, what, if I had won that medal, would I have carried on and become the person that I am today? So probably not. I probably might have maybe retired earlier. And would I have maybe been as resilient and fought through it? I might have, been like, well, I've kind of, completed the computer game as such, and that's it. I don't have to look back. I can kind of, my life is complete, sort of thing. So, it gave me something to fight for and to keep going, and actually realize that there's more to life than medals. And as much as medals are awesome, but there's my value of success has to come from more than just the materialistic items. And it was a huge life lesson that's allowed me to kind of, transition out of sport much more successfully, in a sense of, okay, I'm not gunning for medals. I am gunning for being able to do an interview, or being able to do my commentary well, or, those little things. And it reminds me of those moments. And also it means I am human as well, because we hear success stories of the medal winners, and which is awesome and really, really inspiring. But also I'm proud of my fourth place, and I want to be able to, talk about it. And for me, the closest person I've kind of found with that was Fran Halsall. Like, her view on her fourth place as well, for me, really hit home.
Yeah.
And, not many athletes talk about it as much. So I think it's important to talk about it. And then the other one was the Commonwealth Games, from no medals to a medal, but it wasn't so much the medal, but in 2014, defending my title.
Yeah.
And it was only purely because I'd overcome like quite a rough year, in a sense of, it was the best I'd ever trained, but the worst I'd ever raced, literally up until the Commonwealth Games. And they changed the program so that the 400 iron was in day one. Not only was it day one, it was the first event. So I was under a huge amount of pressure to defend my title, to bring home Scotland's first medal. And everybody's like, yeah, it's going to be easy, it'll be fine. And I was like, no, but Amy Wilmot is like absolutely flying this year. She's kicking my arse every time I race her. And to come home with the win, it wasn't so much the win, it was the ability of, my dad never doubted me. The last thing he said to me was, you've done everything possible this season. He's like, I'm so proud of you. All you've got left to do is just race. He's like, that's all you need to do is just race. And as soon as I hit that wall, it was like, it was the most painful 400 I've ever done, but it reminded me of, keep it simple, literally just, because I had no control, because Amy could have still, kicked my arse on it. And it just, you have no control over the outcome at all. Because that swim there was something like half a second quicker than my swim in Rio, yet two very different emotional swims. But for me, it was being able to overcome the pressure, being able to have a bit more self-confidence, and actually, for people to believe in me with it as well, and believe in myself. So those two for me are kind of like my standout moments. So I cheated slightly, it's not just one.
No, fantastic. And thank you for telling, because they're two very different experiences, obviously, but kind of feel like they culminated in the same kind of outcome mentally, which is quite nice. So very, very final question, I promise. When you're swimming from the shallow end to the deep end, are you swimming up or are you swimming down? Uphill or downhill?
I'm going from shallow end to deep end, downhill, deep end to shallow end, uphill.
Nice. I think you're the same as me. Brilliant. It's it's something that I haven't asked somebody for a while, actually, but it was a debate we had a while ago, and quite a lot of people
thought about it in that sense. That's actually quite cool. And it wasn't until I remember swimming in my sort of old pool in Inverurie and like feeling like, yep, deep end to shallow feels like I'm doing that. Shallow end to deep feels like I'm doing that. So
well, I'm the same as you. I feel like I'm going downhill when I'm going to the deep end, but some people say it's like an uphill battle going to the deep end. So it depends how you see things.
That's a cool.
Thank you very much for coming on and for just being so open and honest. It sounds like you've done some fantastic things, obviously, since retiring. We all know what a fabulous swimmer you were. So thank you again for sharing some of that as well. And honestly, all the best. Thanks again, and see you soon.